functions as a service, and there is different set of databases. There are integrated platforms, which is cognitive services, and different things which is available like policies, monitoring, and advisory, and other things. And tooling, obviously, GitHub, Visual Studio Code, everything, right? So if you are a developer, you will be obviously knowing all of these things. So this is, just keep in mind, this is the platform, application platform. There is infrastructure as a service for you to go back and use. There is container platform as a service, where it is specifically to containers and used as a platform as a service. And platform as a service itself has a couple of things, which is app service, container apps, and other things. And functions as a service is nothing but Azure Functions, which we have. And there are databases and integrated platforms to it. Okay. So coming back to the agenda, right? So basically, I want to share three things here. One, understand if you have a code, how you can go back and deploy in Azure. There are various ways. One of the best, obviously, you can use a virtual machine and other things which are pretty easy, which is just a replication of your laptop, right? But there is app service, there is Azure Functions, there is Azure Static Web App, and then there is specifically if you have containers, if you have Dockerized your application, how you're going to go back and deploy that. We'll see some of these as a demo. And from an Azure AI perspective, what are the things that are available from an AI where uh, you can apply AI to your applications or build new AI models and all those things. So I'll just, from a code perspective, I'll just go through this so that you understand how to get started with these things from Azure App Service perspective. Okay, let me show you a simple way to run it, right? So you have this portal. You can see my portal. Okay, now just go to the portal, and this is Azure. Even before you go there, I think this is very important. Even before we go to Azure App Service, I think this is how Azure is structured. We will see how Azure is structured. Okay. Most important thing in Azure, everything is called as a resource. Okay? If you have Azure, if you log into Azure and you create a VM, you create a service, it is called as a resource, and everything is logically grouped as resource groups. Okay, so this is logical grouping. You might have 10 resources, which you might have 10 VMs, or two VMs, two Kubernetes service, or two Azure container apps, and two Azure app service. Everything can be part of one resource group. It is logically creating that group. And similarly, this can be under Azure subscription, which is also a logical grouping, and it is controlled through a subscription key, right? And you can see that here, right? That's what Azure subscription is. And everything is controlled via API endpoint, and there is an endpoint, and there is Azure Resource Manager, and it provides API endpoint for anyone to connect. And there are three different ways to connect to Azure. Okay, so when I'm asking like Azure, it's more of public cloud and accessible via internet, right? And you can access it via three clients. One is Azure CLI, Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell. There is fourth client, which is Visual Studio Code, right? So you can obviously access all of these things through this endpoint. So if you see, this is how it is structured. There is different client which is calling the API endpoint. For example, if you go to portal, which I showed you, it is basically talking to the REST API endpoint, and that is internally talking to the Azure resource provider, and then it is talking to the subscription and resource group. Say, for example, this is how exactly it works. So you, through PowerShell, you make a call to create a resource. It goes a VM resource. So these are different resource providers which is behind this resource manager, and there is obvious reasons, right? Because you obviously always you will not have a endpoint available directly accessing the client. There is one step below that, there is a providers being separated, And within that separated providers, there is Azure PowerShell, which is calling a REST API endpoint via the Azure Resource Manager. It is talking to the VM resource provider, and through that, you're actually creating a resource. And obviously, Azure subscription is the key to this, right? So if you take the other things, which is more important thing is trust, right? If you bring in trust into this, that means as a developer, if you're sending out a message saying AZ login or AZ create VM, right? So there, whether this person has any kind of role and also is in part of the subscription to create the VM, right? To do that, there is something called as Azure Active Directory. So this is where the tenant is. You are part of the tenant, and the subscription falls under the part of the tenant. So now, if you see this, this is going here, where it is part of the tenant. He is part of the tenant, or she is part of the tenant. So that is the reason why I can allow the person to access the VMs. Somebody can mute the person.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the thing. So most important thing now is whether the person is, yes, he's part of the tenant, but does he have a role to create the VM? Right? That is more important, right? Whether the person is having the role to create it. That's where this Azure role-based access becomes the most important thing. And again, if you see the policies are available as well. What do you mean by policies here? So uh, I am creating a VM, and which kind of VM I'm creating. Am I creating a powerful machine? I'm creating a very less powered machine, or there is a B2 machine and all those things which is there in Azure. Whether I have the policies in place, whether the person who is logged in, who has the role to create the VMs, whether the policy allows him to create those VMs, because anybody can go and create a very powerful machine, right? And it is cost if you go back and create such powerful machines. So there is a policy in place that the person who is logged in, who has the permission to create this machine, have a policy in place where he cannot create the powerful machines, right? So that is what policies mean. And when the limit is applied, there is something called as resource limit, which is coming in within this diagram. If you see here, it's more of limiting the limiting the person to create VMs at certain points. Say for example, the person has logged in. Yes, he's amazing. He's able to create the VMs, and he is able to create the VMs within that policies, but he can only create 10 machines out of that. So that is what resource limit is. So these are the policies, and limiting is very important when you build these public cloud. And obviously finance commitment limits. Again, I can only spend this much. I can put some limits onto that as well. So that's how Azure is structured. So if you want to understand Azure in depth, it's basically there are three clients: CLI, Portal, PowerShell. And this is one of the questions you're going to get if you are taking certification of Azure Fundamental. Which is how many clients we have? Three clients. And what are these clients? These are the three clients. And there is REST API endpoint. And once the you hit the REST API endpoint, Azure Resource Group first checks whether this person is trusted through Azure Active Directory and all the associated things within the subscription, the resource policies and resource limit, finance commitment, tenant, role-based access, everything is all perfect. Then the resource group allows the person to go back and create the resource using the Azure resource provider. That's how Azure is structured. Okay. Now I'll go back to this. In this portal which I have. So I'm using portal. You can use CLI, you can use PowerShell, you can use Visual Studio Code. I'm just showing you the portal. Once you log into the portal, there are a bunch of things which is on your side where you can go and create a resource. You can see dashboards, you can see all the resources, resource groups, and there are some favorite resources which I can create. These are all called as resources. And I'll just show you how to create a web app service, right? So there is app service, which I can go back and create. So let us create one, right? So if you see here, again, I did talk about this. There is subscription. It is logically grouping the resource group. We will call it future ready, right? Future ready talent, right? That is one. And we can name it some app, right? Or some app is somebody has taken it. Okay, cool. So either you can use different kind of code. We'll talk about static web app. We will talk about that. You can use code or you can use Docker container. I am a container person, so I'm using Docker container. And then there is different operating system. If you see, this is platform as a service because I am controlling the operating system. I'm controlling rest of the things which I'm going to show you as well. So let me create this in where? What do you want? Central US. Okay. So here there is a plan, Linux plan. So I'm creating some plan here, and you can basically uh, this is the basic plan which you can go with. But if you go back here and select code, and you can change the different runtime stack. So if you go here and say, okay, Python and different things which are available, right? So let me go back here, do this. I just, okay, cool. So create new plan. Don't want new plan. Let me use the same plan. Or redundant and go to Docker and say single container. I can use Azure Container Registry. I will show you how to create container registry, but this is already been created. So basically I have a container registry and I have a container which is running, um, and I have version 1 and I don't need a startup command. I'll just create and run it. So it's so easy to create an application. So I'll show you the code which I am basically using here. Then demos. I have so many demos that I have forgot where I keep the code. Okay. Yes. Okay. Cool. So this is the demo app which I have. It's a very simple app. And if you take the Docker file, this is the Docker file which is there, and it is being Dockerized already, right? So if you see, this is what I'm using. So it's a simple code which is calling some it's saying it's a Blazor app, right? How Blazor works, and it's a simple getting started Blazor app. So I'll just go and create this. So I'm already having this in the containers, right? So what is, how many of you know what is container is? What is a container? Anyone who wants to
Sir,
answer?
you mean variable?
Sorry?
Sir, you mean variable?
No. Anyone else? Anyone else know what is a container is?
Storage device.
No. Anyone else?
It is Docker container.
Yeah, it is Docker container, but what is Docker container? Docker is just a company name. What is a container?
Somebody has written is a cluster where we run our operations.
No.
Okay. Students, please try.
So this is, see, basically very important to understand. Imagine I
A
have this
standard
code.
package of software.
Sorry,
A standard package of software.
close enough. So basically how world works, okay? Let me share this with you all. Okay. It's okay to put it here. I'll anyways remove this. So you can all see my screen, my code.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So how previously the world used to work before containers, I have the code. I have this code. Okay. I was sharing this code with whom? With my fellow developers, right? Right? You would share this code to fellow developers because we are all coding together and on the same application. So I have 15 developers coding together and we are coding together and we are sharing it. But while we are coding together, we have our own laptops. Imagine, your laptops, it's basically, um, it's basically what's happening in your laptop is you have installed Java 11, okay? And your another developer who is with you, who is also working with your team within your team, is also using Java what? 8. Okay. Now both of them have different environment, right? One developer has Java 8, the other person has Java 11, and the person who is working on Java 8, he is also working on different project which requires Java 8. And there is one more developer who is working is on 11. He requires 11 itself, right? So basically what's happening is there is a code base and there is developers are developing it on different environments, and I'm going to share that code with the another developer, and when he takes that code and installs on his laptop, the complete environment change used to break things for us, right? That's how previously the work was happening, and it was really difficult for us to maintain that whole code base, right? Because as a developers we share data, we develop on it every day, and then there is it's breaking just because of environment changes. Now, what happened was when container comes came into picture, what it does is basically it virtualizes the environment. So as a developer, so if you see here, let me show you the Docker file. So I'm going to start with base image, and I'm going to set this up properly with the working directory, copy this, do this, and all those things. And even in depth, this is also in the backend. It is also using Linux and all those things as a top level images, right? So that is what it is packaging. Okay. So basically, Docker is nothing but a packaging tool where you have code base and it has been packaged to work on any environment. Even though I have Java 11 and Java 8 is where the code is running, it will create the Docker image which is there on Java 8, and I can install and run it on Java 8. So if you see here, I can change this to probably 7, and I can use it, and it can be 6 and I can use it. And anyone who is accessing this piece of code can easily run it. So that is what it is. Okay, so it is nothing but a packaging thing. And this is the advanced way of using your code. So there is a code, there is a packaging system. So you have packaged it in a one format, and the same format is taken to all other places. So for example, I have this Docker which is installed. I have um, I have done uh, say for example, if you go here, this is the code base which we are talking about. Now if I go here and say Docker images, So I have all the images for that code for different code has been created here. You can see this, right? So let me show you why this is stuck. Mm, okay. So if I go here and say Docker images, you can see there are certain images being created, images is being packaged. So now if I go here and say, okay, Docker build hyphen T, and what is this called? Container apps, right? This is the build which I have, container apps version 2 in the local directory. If you see here, it packages my code. Now you can use this code. So if I give you this code or this image, you can go back and use this code. So this is what containers is all about. How do I use this code? So just go here into my VS Code and go to the Docker extension I have. And you can see here, I did the build version 2 and just push this version 2 to Azure container registry. Container registry is nothing but a repository of keeping all these images. That's it. So it is just a repository. That is what I used in my Azure App Service, where I went and created an app service. The in app service, there is a container registry which I gave and I selected some code, right? So all I'm doing is taking this code, packaging it as container as an image which is in part of the container and pushing it to container registry. And this is my container registry because I have logged into my Azure, and this is Docker extensions has been added into my Visual Studio Code. I'm pushing this, and um, you can see the code will go to my registry. So where can I find this code? Let me show you. Say I'll go to my Azure portal. I'll go to dashboard. I'll go to Azure resources, and in within that resources you can see bunch of resources I have created. One of the thing is registry, container registry. So when you open the container registry and go for repositories, you can see here container apps. Both the versions are here. Version 1, I used version 1 for the deployment of the app. This is version 2, which I just built it in front of you. And this is how you can use it. And even you can use Docker pull command, and you can pull this code now on your laptop. If you have Docker installed, you can use this command and pull the code onto your laptop and run this code on your own on your laptop. And there is no need to make any kind of environment settings. There's no need to make anything. All you need to do is just pull this image and run the container. So that is the flexibility Docker provides. Previously, what used to happen? I had code. I used to share the code with the another developer, like my in my previous life, which I have to sell. So I have to share this code to rest of the developers, and they used to copy the code and try to run it. And there is bunch of errors because I have changed some environment variables. I have added some Python 3 code. I have added something else in those all of these things in the code, which is not available on the developer system. Now think that we are only sharing code between developers. Imagine there is production environment and we are sharing the same code on the production environment where there is a mismatch of environment variables, environment itself. That is where the challenge comes in as well. So managing that production is nothing but what? It's a transaction which is happening, business transactions are happening. We can't go down, right? It can't have two different environments. It has to be the same environment which we are using. So imagine, you running that app there and it is failing. So that is what containers is. And if you take this as an example, right? Now I use the same container to um, run the application, which is Blazor app, right? Or what is that? What is that we created? Some app, right? So if I go to some app, I don't know whether this code is running. So I took the code, I just deployed it through the container, and if you see here, some app is running, right? So this is how it works. So now there is no issues. Even you can change the code, even I can change the code, everybody can change the code. It will still keep running. So this will keep running. There is no issues with this code, right? So and also both of us can share the code between each other and the production all via the container registry. So this is all happening through container registry only. So that the container registry maintains everything, right? So that is what containers is and container data is. So basically, Azure App Service is that's how it works, and Azure Functions is little bit changing. It changes the whole game, right? Because here, if you see, um, we did create with what we knew which OS we were running. We knew the which plan it is running. Basically, this is B1 plan, free tier, right? So there are different plans in Azure App Service, so that is available. So there are different things which is available, right? These are all controlled by me, right? But it because I am using Linux, that somebody has to patch it because there is a lot of traffic coming into this website now. If it is a real website, if it is real production, if traffic is coming, then it is not scalable because I need to go and change the plan, and it is not always easy to change plan, right? You can't keep upgrading it. So that's when functions comes into picture. So it's easy to create function, which is nothing but app service. It's just that it is in the consumption plan. So when I say consumption plan, it means that the code is same, everything is same. You are running an API, you are doing some asynchronous. Um, the only change there is it is scalable, it is managed, it is availability is maintained by us, scalability, the reliability, the performance, security, everything is taken care by the service provider. You're only going and deploying this app. You're only focusing on code. So that is why I always say you're focusing on code and not plumbing. So whenever it is about managing the infrastructure and other things, it's more of plumbing job, right? So you're only focusing on code when you're using functions. So there is no infrastructure management. It will scale automatically. So whenever there is a traffic coming in, it will automatically scale to 1 to 30 replications of your application. And obviously you are only paying for what is running. So once the traffic comes down, the replication also comes down. That's what Azure Functions is all about. And Azure Function is also a programming model, the way you need to program it. And it's basically a locally available for you to manage it. And also you have to deploy that code. And this is how it works. Basically, there is a trigger. So this is an event-driven architecture. So when you building functions, it is an event-driven architecture. So there is an event which is happening, which is nothing but a trigger. And this trigger is basically having two things. One is input binding, one is other output binding. What It's very simple to understand input binding. That means you're talking to some database and bringing in data to perform some action whenever there is an event happening, which is through triggers. And what is output binding? The output binding is nothing but you are actually posting some data to some other third-party tool where that data is being used for some activity. So that is what this whole functions is built in. And and basically some of the scenarios I have, if you're building projects, I have a couple of scenarios to share. If you're started the project, if you're building some projects, you can focus on building it via Azure Functions, and some of these are free tier, so you can obviously use it. So one of the thing is like if you have online order system, like if you order through web app, it goes into a queue, and you are using queue triggers to through functions to push some data to Cosmos DB, to push some data to database. So that's one of way to build an application. Uh, and again, these are all different API calls you can make through, especially when you're going with your friends and you you all have paid, or somebody, one person has paid, and he's asking for others to say give the money back. This is how you can build it, where you have the call option and there is database, it is storing it and it is sending out a trigger to send a notification to different mobiles, which is there, which is your friend's mobile. It is being used in manufacturing industry. How it is being used, there is different machines actually sharing the data, and these data is getting processed. And then there is, you're using Azure Logic Apps to connect with different third-party tools to even submit anomaly detection. So that's one of the way to build application. And in terms of functions, there are bot processing system, bunch of things I have in terms of file processing as well. You can take a picture of file and use functions and store the structured data, unstructured data into a structured data. So there is bunch of things which you can do, and we will discuss these things when we go for a Q&A. I will not just spend more time there. So I'll move on to Azure Static Web App. What is Azure Static Web App? Is basically you have a static web content, right? So you know HTML, HTML pages and JavaScripts and CSS. It's a static web app, static application. So it is called static web apps. So you have the code, you have GitHub, you're just pushing it to Azure Static Web Apps and hosting that page. But hey, you also need some activity to go on. For example, I'll show you an example of static web app which we have. So I run a show called samosachai.net, and we have this samosachai.net as a website. And if you see this content of this website, it is on static web app as of today, and it is built on static web app, and it is hosted on Azure Static Web App. And if you see the content today, right, it is all static. This is an image, these are content, this is an image, these are all CSS and HTMLs, and these are all, again, CSS and HTML, right? So there is nothing really happening on this page. So this page is very static. There is no activities happening. And unless and until you want to do some activities like some some fun part which we built, which is dark mode, light mode, and all those things. But apart from that, there's nothing special happening on this page, right? But what is that missing point here is, we do have sessions which is happening. For example, ready to join our next event. We do have sessions which are happening. So if I go and click here, there are sessions which is happening in samosachai.net, which is already hosted there on March 9th or some 10th and March 30th and all those stuff. But that data is not available here. I want to pull that data onto this website, and it should be live always. So we are doing this session every month, right? Every month 2 sessions are happening or 3 sessions are happening, and I want that to be updated. All the latest sessions which are happening need to be updated here. Whenever you come onto this website, you have to see those sessions here, right? So how do I do that? So that is where Azure Functions comes into picture. The support of Azure Functions as part of the API call, which I can make to my database and bring in that data and host it here, right? So that is what Azure Static Web Apps is. So you have a simple website, and it is having integrated with Azure Functions, which can make a call to my database and bring in that data and manage it to show it here for you to see. So that is what Static Web Apps is. You can go back and try out Azure Static Web App. I'm not going to spend much time here. Okay, now coming to containers, I did explain to you what is containers are, and I feel the crowd is here is yet to understand what containers are and how to orchestrate containers. So Azure Kubernetes Service is more of orchestrating containers. I showed you one container, the example which I showed you as part of the Azure App Service. That's part of the one container is what being managed, but in real world, in real microservice environment, we have more than 50 containers, 30 containers running, and replications of those running. So managing that is where Azure Kubernetes Service comes into picture, and Azure Container Apps as well. will be uh, will be the next level, because for as a developer, you would start with VMs and then go with Azure Container Apps, and then you're going to manage it with Azure Kubernetes Service. That's the path which you are going to take. Never go directly into managing containers on Kubernetes Services, because it's huge. It's something for orchestrating the containers, right? So given that, container apps is where I want to spend some time and share some of the details with you. Um, these are all not so important. It's a serverless container. It's easy to do. If you know about Azure Containers Service, you will know better of container apps. But I'll show you how easy it is to build and deploy. So I'm not going to spend much time on how these container apps work. It's more of you have the code, you push it to GitHub repo, you have the container registry, which I showed you, right? You build the container, you push it to the container registry, and then you are going to push it to container apps. That's all. So we did see container on the same code which I shared shared on the Azure App Service. The same code we're going to run it in Azure Container Apps. Okay, so these are all slides which is uh, quite advanced. So let's not spend time there. So let us go, and so if all the container related stuff are here, right? You go and create, there is containers, there's bunch of things you can do with containers. Container registry is here. So I can go back and create a new container registry, but I already showed you how container registry is. So you just create, provide all the details which is there, and container registry is just there. And container apps is here. So you just click on container apps. Um, so you provide a resource group. So I'm going to use the same resource group I was using, and I can name this as some app vs1. I give this, okay, and basically I can use any environment. Environment is nothing but is a again logically grouping of these container apps, and basically within that there is a container apps you can deploy, where obviously you can talk to each other, right? So here is a quick start, but I don't want to use quick start. I'm going to use Azure Container Registry, the same thing which I have, and the same code which I deployed. So we can select the container app which we had, and then select the version which we want to deploy. We can deploy version 2 because in there we deployed version 1. Here we can deploy version 2, and Linux is the type, and nothing else I'm doing. I'm just enabling ingress, traffic, access. All these things are there, and port 80 is where my target port is. So I'm just going and reviewing and creating this. Okay. So it will just review and then create. So it will take some time to create. Let's not wait for it to create because it's going to take some time. So in just to show you, I already created a one. Where did it go? Okay, so I've already created one app, which is the same app which is there. It will take some time because of the containers will be shut down. It is has to come back. The same app is here, right? So if you see this, I've used the same app on both the services which we have, and I can deploy it in multiple services, and the use of these services are quite different, right? App service, I have I can deploy via code, I can deploy via container, I can deploy a static web app, but in the container apps you can only use containers, and this is more of differently used because it has support for dappers, it has support for keda, for event driven containers and other things, and it has a Kubernetes capabilities of ingress and other things. So because these are a little bit advanced in terms of how you do it, but basically if you have a container, how to deploy it, is this is the way. If you have a code, how to deploy it is via Azure App Service. If you have a code and you don't want to manage all of these different infrastructure, Azure Functions is one of the way. And if you just have the static web app, which is all static website, and probably you have a couple of things where data is being fetched from backend and you're deploying it on the website, that's where you're going to use Azure Static Web App. These are four different things which I talked about, right? So those are four different ways to do it. You can go back and try all of these things. Um, Let me come back to the slide. So I'm going to spend some time on AI. You know, I will not be able to demo a lot of things in AI because we are almost going out of time. So I just want to spend what are the key elements of AI is, which is machine learning, where you have the data and you teach the computer model, and there is a it is basically drawing some conclusion. That is what machine learning is all about. There is a data, and it is taking in data, and it is predicting something out of that data. And anomaly detection is basically there is, say for example, there is a car which is there, and there are a bunch of car. It is sending telemetry data, and sometimes it sends telemetry data which is showing some anomaly that is being detected through the AI. Computer vision is all about through pictures and images and cameras, what you can do in terms of identifying something and interpreting it through images and through videos, right? And natural language processing is all about speech to text, text to speech, and all of those things. And conversational AI is more of agents. So machine learning is more of training the machine to learn now from the data which we are provided, just the way humans learn stuff, right? So like just the way you learn what is this color, or just the way you learn what is this flower, is this a vegetable, or is this a fruit. All of these things you have been learning as human, right? The same way how machine can learn through data. So that is what machine learning is. And very simple example, if you see here different flowers and different kinds of flowers, and you train it and you show it the flower, it will identify which this flower is, right? That's the simple example which I give you. So by the way, if you want to get started with machine learning, you want to learn more different techniques and all of those things, you can go to this link and um, get an access to this. I'll share this link in the chat as well. And again, this one is more about algorithms. So there is an algorithm which different algorithms which are available for machine learning, right? So this is again this particular link is very important for that as well. Just go back and learn this stuff. So from an AI strategy perspective, we have three different buckets, which is AI. Already pre-built models, everything is available for you from an AI apps and agents, right? So you can just use these cognitive services, bring AI to your application. There is knowledge mining, which is you have bunch of different set of data. You might have data on PPT, you might have data on an Excel sheet, you might have data on a PDF. All of this data is available in organization, right? How do you take all of this data and build a knowledge based on this data is what knowledge mining is all about. And then there is machine learning, which is it's basically you building your own models and using that as an endpoint. But we already have pre-built models in the first bucket. So if you want to get started, that's the bucket. If you want to go in depth and build your own models, that's where you're going to use machine learning studios and other things. So I'm not going to spend much time on what all we provide. These are different things: speech to text, language, web service, a lot of things. Uh, this is one of the examples which is out there. It is taking this picture, moving picture, and it is telling what it is. It's a road, it's a buildings, there are street, people walking. So that's what uh, computer vision is all about. And custom vision is all about you uploading data and training it and evaluating it. It's basically your data. It is general data, but here it's your custom vision. So face detection, all of this. And this is one of the example which we just wanted to show you how face detection work. You come and stand in front of the system and it identifies you as a person and it lets you in. So that's one of the examples which is there. And then there are forms, which is where from through forms you can actually collect data. So for example, you have one form, you take a picture of that and it basically captures all the data and converts it into a database, right? So it's so easy to manage invoices, different forms and other things. Um, Speech to text, text to speech, speech synthesizers, translation into different languages. All of these things has been provided as part of the cognitive services, which is there. I might show this example for you, but it is going to take a lot of time. But what here we are doing is basically there are three people in the room who are talking, and you can see whatever she is speaking is being recorded at the back in the meeting. And what's happening here is, there is a real time recognition, and it is also identifying a different set of people in the room. So you can say who are the three people and who is actually speaking through voice recognition, and then it is recording that feed, and then basically it is uh, taking that input and creating a meeting in insight. So it is going to create insight and notes and probably even add different language to these things. Say, for example, we might have a person who is from China, who is sitting here, or person who is from different state, and it actually converts the notes, the things into different languages. So you can see this example is pretty explanatory in terms of demo perspective, right? So you can see the action items being taken automatically and not really being shared with others, right? This is the kind of projects, and this is getting converted into Chinese language as well from a speech perspective. So this is how this works, and this is the translation which I was just talking about, different language translations which are available. Knowledge mining is all about having different set of data. So as I told you, there are different source of data, which is HTML, PDF, docs, and various other things. And then you can convert that into cloud and ingest this into the cloud, and it uses our cognitive service, which is face detection, language detection, various other things, and converts it into a understandable document, right? And once it is done, you can obviously go back and see this. So I'm not going to spend time here on these things. Machine learning is basically you building your own stuff. So I'm not going to spend time on the monitoring stuff. So um, you can go back and basically I use this Azure Fundamentals for startup, where you can go as part of the developer, as part of the startups, you can go and read all of these things, whatever I showed you, everything is available as part of this link. So you can go back and take a look at it. Now I would like to take questions. I want to spend at least 10 to 15 minutes on questions. It's okay if anybody have any, if you want to leave, you can leave, but I can spend time 10 to 15 minutes for sure. So I can take questions. Okay. So um, let me stop this and so that I can easily answer questions.
So, Vivek, we have two students whose hands have been raised. So we can
Yeah,
start with them and then get to the questions in the chat.
sure.
So, Shivansh, you had your hand up first. If you can unmute yourself and ask your question to Vivek, please. Shivansh, if you are still on the call, I see your hand has been raised for a while. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or if you would prefer to post your question on the chat, you can do that and Vivek will answer that. Okay, I think Shivansh might be having audio issues, so we'll wait for him on the chat. But in the meantime, we have another question from Aisha Kumari. If you'd like to come on unmute and ask your question to Vivek, please.
Thank you, Vivek sir, for making the session beginner friendly, first of all. Sir, the one in the slide which you are showing, I just log into the home page. Right now, I'm in the home page. You are showing the structure of Azure. So can you please copy paste the link in the chat box so that I can directly visit that?
Sure, I can do that. Just a minute. Then. Yep, I did. Any other question? I think there were some questions from the before I started the session. So
Sir,
We
I
have
have
another.
okay.
Okay.
go ahead, go
Aisha, do you
ahead.
have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, just as I mentioned, I'm new to this. So, is there any prerequisite to cover so that I can move smoothly with this course?
See, so there is a learn path which is Azure Fundamentals learn path. I'm sure they would have shared the link with you. Um, that's where you should get started with. But there are bunch of learning materials and learn modules which is available in Microsoft, where you can take a look at the containers. What is a container? What is Azure Kubernetes Service? There is an amazing workshop on Kubernetes Service which is there, where you can actually spin up a sandbox and use it and see all of these things. You don't really have to have an account. Basically, Microsoft Learn provides you the sandbox, so you can actually play around with all of these things. Um, so just try all of these things and see how exactly it works. So I would say start with fundamentals, because you need to understand the fundamentals to go in depth with all of these things, right? So basically, what is cloud? What is why uh, infrastructure as a service? Why platform as a service? What is the advantage, disadvantage of all of these things? Why why public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, which is better? And why somebody has a strategy of hybrid cloud? Why somebody has a strategy for private cloud? Understand all of these things to to go next. The next is how to build an application. Start with simple Azure static web app and deploying it, and slowly build Azure. I mean, build a code, build a simple web app, and deploy it onto Azure. Azure App Service, and then containerize this application whichever you have built, and deploy it onto the Azure App Service with containers, and then go back and try and deploy this in the container apps, and then use Kubernetes service to deploy the same application. How do you scale this? Why these three different services being used, and it is the same code which I am deploying, right? So, but it is obviously for different reasons. I understand all of those reasons. So the story has to be like this, right? So fundamentals, and then go and deploy a simple app, then go and build a project on static web app, then build a proper application where there is an access to database, and you're doing all the actions on the database, right? They create, delete, update, and all of those things. And then you're taking that to the next level, where you're scaling these applications, where if there is more traffic coming into your application, how do you scale? So those are the areas where you have to look into. And how do you there was a good question as well. How do you become a DevOps engineer as well? When I saw some of the questions. So after doing all of these things, how do you manage this code when it is in production? That's where DevOps comes into picture, because as the traffic comes in, you will have to scale this application. How do you manage this code when it is running and people are accessing it? Imagine Uber. right? You are using Uber every day, you're using Rapido every day. You know, these application has to run. It cannot fail. It can, you, if you are looking for a cab, it has to give you a cab. Um, Nowhere it goes down. If it going down, it's all over the internet, right? So so basically, how to manage this, right? See all the problems you will be facing. That's when you become a DevOps engineer. So you build your application, you create load on your application, use Azure load testing. All you need to do is use load testing, put your URL, run it. It will create a load on your application, and it will show you how good your app is, right? So how do you scale it from there when load is coming onto your application? So all of these things can be done on the Azure, right? So that's how you can actually spend time on all of these services. If you're new, start with all of this stuff.
Thank you, sir.
We have another question from Prakar Deep. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. Hi, Prakar. You can go ahead and ask your question, please. Okay, I think he might be facing slight audio issues. Prakar, if you can hear us, just paste your question in the chat. Vivek will look at it and answer from that. In the meantime, Shivansh, I know you had a question. If your mic is disabled, you can post the question in the chat. We'll take it up from there. And this applies for all students. If you have any questions at all that you have for
Hello.
Vivek from, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Uh, Sir, I have a question. I
Yep.
was building a project where I've used data storage account, where I make the data storage account. Then I upload some files in the container. Then I use Azure Synapse Analytics, and in that I have used SQL pool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm creating a data pipeline ingestion through
Mm-hmm.
Azure storage to SQL pool, making a data pipeline. To
Mm-hmm.
I'm ingesting the then when I'm loading the SQL pool tables into Power BI,
Mm-hmm.
there is error. It says Power BI only work with a uh, company account, yeah, work account. So I make my say
I
it's
think
okay,
so
but I'm using
basically,
Azure with my personal account.
yeah, yeah.
So how can I integrate both of them?
So so I'm also not aware of the issue you're facing. So
Okay.
basically, maybe you're trying to access different, you have Power BI in different tenant. That is the reason why it is you don't have the access to use it, or the subscription should be an issue. Do one
No,
thing.
no, no. I think Power BI requires a work account. I mean, let's say its domain should not be Gmail or Outlook something. Okay, it
No,
should
not
be a
necessarily. So
company
if you're,
based.
yeah, it's basically sometimes, I mean, not necessarily if you are using both the things and you have access to both, and it is through only one account, one Microsoft account which you have, it should be working. If it is not working, then there is some issue, some other issues as well. Do one thing, you put a post to the a question to the support. They will reply to you, or you can go back to question and answers website which is there, and post your question, and there will be someone from the Microsoft team which will answer those questions. There is a question and answer website we have.
I only know support email.
Yeah, you can do support. The first thing you can do the support, because I'm not aware like what are the structure, what is yours. It is a debugging, right? We'll have to sit together and debug it. Um, so it is going to take some time though. So I'll just post you the link where you can ask questions, and there is a dedicated Microsoft team which is answering all these questions. So you can actually ask questions
Okay.
here. Okay,
Okay.
I've just posted the link for you.
We have a question from Saurabh Mani, who asks which cloud approach is used by organizations to take full advantages of an on-premise technology investments.
It's a kind of question like you are saying, I have on-prem investment done, and what should I use in cloud?
Saurabh, if you're on the call, feel free to come off mute and you can ask Vivek your question directly so you can explain it a little better. I think there
Very
might
good.
be an audio issue
You can
from
type
his
in
end.
as well.
Yeah,
So so basically, I mean, if you're looking at cloud approach, which is used by organization, um, see, if I have done an on-prem investment, I'm going to keep that on-prem investment for sure, because I've already done the investment. And there are a couple of things which I'm going to use in public, cloud, which is probably the functions and other things, or the new projects which I'm building and everything. I will move it to cloud, and whatever on-prem investment I've done will be for legacy things. I will never go back and think from walking towards doing more of on-prem investments for the new things which I'm starting. For old ones, which is already there, I'll keep that investment going on. But that is also the mindset changing. People are moving to cloud, even moving those on-prem apps to cloud. So if you go to app service today, you can do migrations of your .NET apps through app service, where you can do migrations, and it will give you the path to migrate, the dependencies and all those things. It will show you everything, and then it will be available for you to use. So that those services are available, the migration tools are available, migration things are available. So that's the thing. So there
Prakhar,
is,
yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
Prakar. Yeah, I saw Prakar's question, like query related to GitHub deployment. Yeah, what is the query? Like, you can unmute yourself and ask me, or you can type it in the chat itself so that I can answer that for you.
And also, students, after this, we'll take only one last question because we have run over time. So if you have any other further questions for Vivek, let us know. If you have any questions regarding the FRT program or any issues that you are having during your journey, you can write to us at support@futurereadytalent.in and we'll answer your questions. But for now, Prakhar, if you would like to ask your question regarding GitHub deployment. If you have a specific question around that, Vivek can answer it.
Oh, okay. You want to know difference between them. Okay, on GitHub, how project on deploy, which one is better? Okay, there's confusion on the questions as well. Okay, so to Prakar's question, right? See, GitHub, um, so GitHub Actions is one of the thing which you need to go back and understand. So GitHub Actions, you have the code, right? The code which I was showing you, it is there on my laptop, and I don't want to maintain that on my laptop. I want to put it on in some place where I can share it with rest of the world. So it's GitHub is the place, and I'm going to share it on the GitHub. And on GitHub as well, I maintain the versions of the code. If you see my code which I had deployed, right, it was showing version 3, right? If you remember, the version there is version 1, there is version 2 of it. Different code bases are available. So version 3, version 4 is where you will be maintaining it on GitHub. Now, when code is on GitHub, I want to deploy this code onto different services I have. It can be Azure Container Apps, it can be Azure App Service, it can be on functions, it can be on Kubernetes. So all of it can be VMs as well. So all of these are different places where you can deploy your code. So you are going to use GitHub Actions and the flexibility of GitHub Actions being provided. So you just want to use that to deploy that code onto any of these services which is available. And once you deploy, the code is available. So you can keep changing the code and pushing it to GitHub. And GitHub is responsible for deploying this through GitHub Actions. It will keep deploying the code to the different services which I just mentioned. So that is how you build deployments. And there are various different stages of deployments. It could be testing environment, pre-production environment, different environments, and code progresses from QA environment to QA environment to pre-production environment to production. So there is a process of how code goes from one environment to another environment. It gets tested and gets load testing done. It gets security testing done and all of these things, and then goes to production. So that's how you can use GitHub. And coming to Saurabh, see there are, as I told you in the beginning, there are three different types, which is public cloud, there is private cloud, and then there is hybrid. Which is better? It is always dependent on different projects, different things. But public cloud, why everybody recommends public cloud is because it is being security tested. So every day somebody is trying to break Azure, right? Every day somebody is going to be trying to access Azure services for through hacking and other things. So Azure is been hardening, right? So there is some concept called as hardening. So if you go into the world of web apps like Nginx and Apache and other things, there is a way to harden the systems. So security is all about hardening it. So we have been hardening our systems. So that is the reason why public clouds are more secure and other things. And private cloud, obviously it is secure because it is within the premises and nobody can access through outside world, but it is costly because uh, I need to procure machines which will take 3 months, 2 months sometimes. I need to set up lab, I need to set up network, I need to set up patching systems, I need to do OS upgrades, and a lot of things which is in the maintenance. I need to make sure I have electricity, I have all of those things being set, which is a costly affair and also very difficult to manage because you need a lot of people to manage, a lot of infrastructure to manage it. Hybrid, it's basically I have public cloud. I'm using certain things in public, but I want certain stuff to be within my premises, which is like database. The data, the healthcare systems, they usually want to keep the data within their premises, but they still want to use the power of the public cloud, which is could be the functions, it could be different VMs which we have, different set of services which we provide. So all of these things they want to use, but still they want to keep certain services within their premises. So that is where hybrid comes into picture. So which is best of all these things? If you're building a simple web app, I would definitely go and use public cloud. If you're building mobile apps, public cloud. So if you're building something related to healthcare and all those things, I want data to be there, hybrid. And private is more of organization's decision. I want to keep all data inside. I want to make sure it is being accessed internally. That's where I'm going to put money in. So that's how it is structured. Okay.
Perfect. I think we are now actually on time, so we will need to wrap up this session. Students, we have also shared our support help desk for future ready talents. So you can also write in to us for that. Thank you, Vivek. I'm sure students have learned a lot. I've learned a lot from this session. So really appreciate it. And students, if you have any feedback or suggestions also for us, please do let us know. We will be also sharing recordings of these sessions via email. So you can look out for that as well. But thank you everyone for joining our session today and look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Vivek. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.